Hello and welcome to Reason News. President Donald Trump has made it clear he might not be attending the G20 summit in South Africa later this year, citing what he calls, quote, very bad policies, unquote, from the host nation. This comes as the country is already grappling with another seismic shift, the implementation of a 30% tariff on South African exports to the United States. This is more than just a diplomatic spat or a trade dispute. It's a collision of global power, domestic policy, and economic reality. What does it mean for South Africa to be hosting the G20 while simultaneously being on the receiving end of a major trade hit from one of its key partners? What is the real impact of these tariffs, and is our government asleep at the wheel, as some are suggesting? Let's start with the G20. South Africa is currently holding the G20 presidency, a significant honor that places our country at the center of global economic and financial cooperation. The summit, scheduled for November, is meant to be a showcase of South Africa's influence on the world stage. But now that spotlight is dimmed by the prospect of the US president's absence. President Trump's reasons for potentially skipping the summit are rooted in his long-standing disapproval of several South African policies. He has publicly taken issue with everything from the country's black economic empowerment policies to its stance on the war in Gaza, where South Africa accused the US ally Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice. These aren't just minor disagreements. They are fundamental clashes of ideology and policy that are putting a deep strain on diplomatic relations. And this isn't the first time the Trump administration has signaled its displeasure. The US has already snubbed several ministerial gatherings hosted by South Africa as part of its G20 presidency. This consistent pattern of disengagement suggests a deliberate strategy to put pressure on South Africa. President Ramaphosa met with Trump in May and expressed his expectation that the US president would attend, but the latest comments from Trump cast a shadow over that optimism. Here's a video from BizNewsTV.
You plan to attend the G20 summit this year in South Africa?
I don't think so. No, I think maybe I'll send somebody else because I've had a lot of problems with South Africa. And they have some very bad policies. Very, very bad policies, like policies where people are being killed. A lot of people are being killed. So I think I probably won't.
Any updates?
I'd like to, but I don't think I will.
Now let's pivot to the economic bombshell that dropped today, a 30% tariff on South African exports to the United States. This is a punitive measure, and it's a direct shot at South Africa's trade relationship with its third largest export market. To understand what this truly means, we turn to the well-respected economist Dawie Roodt. According to Roodt, the most significant consequence of this tariff will be a further blow to South Africa's already fragile economic growth. He explains that while the tariff is technically paid by American importers and consumers, the real pain for South Africa will come from a loss of price competitiveness. South African goods will now be significantly more expensive in the US, which means US buyers will likely buy less from us. Roodt warns that while the immediate direct impact might seem modest, the long-term implications are far more damaging. In an economy that has experienced over a decade of weak growth, every small negative shock adds up. He believes that these tariffs could shave off 0.1% to 0.2% of GDP, which is a significant hit for an economy already struggling to grow at 1%. Here's another video from Truth Report.
The South African economy is hardly growing. My estimates for economic growth this year is that economic growth is unlikely to get to 1%. In fact, I expect something like 0.7, 0.8% economic growth. That in an environment where the population is growing by about 1.3% simply means that on a per capita basis, we're going to get poorer once again, like we've seen so many years before. And the main reason for that has to do with the wrong macroeconomic policies by the ANC government, but also because the ANC government is positioning ourselves, I believe, incorrectly internationally. We should try to be as neutral as possible. Unfortunately, due to our positioning politically internationally and also because of certain policies that we follow in South Africa, the chances that we could be hit by 40% tariffs if we want to export to the United States certainly increased quite a lot. In fact, we don't really know what those tariffs are going to be. Is it going to be 40%? Will there be an additional 10% because we're part of BRICS? Will certain items be excluded from the tariffs? Like, for example, certain basic minerals like platinum, for example. So we don't know. But I think chances are quite good that we will see some additional tariffs. It's even possible that we could see some sanctions against certain individuals in South Africa. But what's the likely impact on that on the South African economy? And of course, depending on the extent of the tariffs, I think the impact is not going to be that large. My expectations is that the impact could be, say, 0.2, 0.3, maybe 0.4% less in terms of economic growth. So we pay a price of 0.3, 0.4% reduction in economic growth because of these tariffs. That is the sort of ballpark scenario. But because we don't know what the tariffs are going to be, calculating these sort of impacts is basically impossible. The main point, however, is that the South African economy is hardly growing. And with an economy that is hardly growing, any additional obstacle is going to be bad for the economy. And like I've mentioned earlier, I don't see the economy growing at 1%, and taking 0.2% of that, 0.3% of that is a significant impact on the South African economy. I think it's crucially important for the South African government to implement the right macroeconomic policies to make it easier and attractive to do business in South Africa, and also to position South Africa internationally in such a manner that we are really neutral when it comes to the various other political players internationally. These Trump tariffs certainly are going to hurt South Africa.
The automotive sector, a major exporter, is expected to be particularly hard hit. Roodt points out that while European car exports face a new 15% tariff, South African vehicles will be subject to the full 30%, leaving local manufacturers at a distinct disadvantage. The Reserve Bank has even estimated that these tariffs could lead to the loss of up to 100,000 jobs, with manufacturing hubs in places like East London and Pretoria expected to bear the brunt. Root's most stinging critique is directed at the South African government. He suggests that Pretoria has been, quote, asleep at the wheel, unquote, failing to proactively engage in constructive diplomacy to avert this crisis. The government, according to Roodt, has not grasped the urgency of the situation and has been unable to secure a better deal or an extension from the Trump administration. The government, for its part, has been in intense negotiations. Trade Minister Parks Tau recently confirmed that the country has submitted a detailed trade and investment proposal to the US and is actively seeking a mutually beneficial solution. But with the tariffs now in effect, it seems those diplomatic efforts may have come too late. This brings us back to the G20. The irony is not lost on many. As South Africa attempts to lead global discussions on economic cooperation and sustainable development, it finds itself caught in the crossfire of international politics and trade wars. The potential snub from President Trump and the economic blow of the new tariffs serves as a harsh reality check. The next few months will be crucial. Will the government be able to mitigate the impact of these tariffs? Will President Ramaphosa's diplomatic efforts finally pay off? And what will the G20 summit look like without one of its most prominent members? One thing is for certain, South Africa's position on the world stage is more challenging. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay informed, updated, and curious.